Chapter 15. Aadhira's heart raced uncontrollably, the room spinning around her in a blur of emotion and confusion. Rudra's touch still lingered on her skin, burning her with memories she couldn't ignore. But even as desire pulsed through her veins, her mind screamed at her to resist. She pushed Rudra away, her eyes blazing with a fierce desperation. "Enough games, Rudra," she whispered fiercely, her voice trembling with both anger and vulnerability. "I deserve the truth." Rudra stared back, his breathing heavy, his eyes wild with conflicting emotions. She could see the battle raging within him, the need to control, the fear of vulnerability, and something deeper, more raw. But she refused to back down now. She'd spent too long living in the shadow of his possessiveness. "Tell me," she demanded, stepping closer despite the way her heart trembled. "Do you love me, Rudra?" The words hung in the charged silence between them. Rudra's jaw tightened, his fists clenched at his sides, as if the truth was physically painful to admit. His eyes searched hers, raw, desperate, filled with fear and longing. "I can't lose you," he finally whispered, voice breaking slightly under the weight of the admission. But instead of relief, Aadhira felt a sharp pang of disappointment tear through her chest. She shook her head, stepping back again. "That's not love," she murmured, her voice breaking with anguish. "That's just fear of losing control." Suddenly, Rudra surged forward, gripping her chin gently but firmly, forcing her gaze upward to meet his own. His eyes were dark, intense, filled with a vulnerability she'd never seen before. His voice was low and dangerous, tinged with an undeniable softness that made her heart skip. "Then let me show you," he growled softly, his breath ghosting hot across her lips. Before she could protest, his mouth crashed onto hers, desperate, passionate, consuming. The kiss was fierce, overwhelming, a tempest of emotions she'd never imagined Rudra capable of expressing. Every hidden emotion he'd buried deep beneath layers of possessiveness surged forward. Longing, passion, and beneath it all, the love he was too afraid to name. Her heart pounded erratically, her mind spun, and her knees felt weak beneath the intensity of his kiss. Rudra's hands cupped her face tenderly, as if she were something precious, fragile even, and Aadhira felt tears sting her eyes at the sincerity and desperation pouring from him. Yet as beautiful and real as this moment felt, doubts crept into her heart once more. She had been hurt too many times by Rudra's emotional walls, his possessive pride, and she knew she needed more than passion alone. With a gentle strength she didn't realize she possessed, Aadhira broke the kiss, pulling back just enough to gaze deeply into his eyes. Her breath was shaky, her voice trembling with unspoken longing. "Prove it," she whispered softly, challenging him even as her heart yearned desperately for his truth. "Not just with kisses, not with words alone. Prove to me that your love is real." For a moment, Rudra was silent, his eyes reflecting an intense storm of fear, uncertainty, and finally determination. Slowly he nodded, lifting his thumb to gently brush away the tears that spilled onto her cheek. His voice was soft yet resolute. "I'll do whatever it takes," he promised, sincerity shining in his eyes. "I'll prove it every day, every moment, until you believe that what I feel for you is real." Aadhira closed her eyes briefly, letting his promise wash over her, feeling its sincerity sink into her bones. When she opened them again, she saw him clearly, no longer as the cold, possessive man she'd married out of necessity, but as someone desperately trying to learn how to love. "Then show me," she whispered, voice breaking slightly. "Not because you fear losing me, but because you genuinely want to love me." Rudra nodded once more, pulling her into his arms, his embrace tender yet fiercely protective. In that moment, he held her as if his very life depended on it. As if by holding her close, he could finally understand how love was truly meant to feel. "I promise," he murmured into her hair, voice filled with quiet sincerity. "I won't fail you again." In the silence of that promise, Aadhira allowed herself to finally surrender, to hope, to trust, and to the possibility that beneath Rudra's possessive facade, there truly was a heart capable of love. It wouldn't be easy. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, doubts, and moments of uncertainty. But in Rudra's arms, wrapped in the warmth of his genuine vow, she knew she was ready to take that risk. Because this time, Rudra was finally willing to prove it, and she was willing to believe him. Chapter 15.